All right, man, peace. You know, brothers, if I was to answer the question of who Bradley Beal reminds me of the most, I'd probably say a modern-day Mitch Richmond. That's who his game reminds me of the most. He's a very competent, very good shooting guard in today's NBA. On a championship team, he's going to have to be your third option. And I just found it very interesting when he gave his testimony of what occurred at the All-Star game during the weekend's festivities. What he basically seemed to describe is that the All-Star game, which at one point back in my childhood was when the best players from the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference met up to showboat for the first 2.5 quarters and then played top-level defense for the last quarter and a half to win. Now the All-Star game or the All-Star weekend has become a basketball open house. That's all that shit is. Niggas just go there to fellowship with other free agents and find out who wants to switch teams. When I read this shit, I said, what the hell is going on here? But anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
All right. You guys ready to keep it rolling? Because I got something interesting for you. So it was only the second All-Star game for Bradley Beal, but this one was more of a recruiting trip telling the Athletic this. It was really crazy. A lot of guys were coming to talk to me and asking me how I feel. The recruiting process is really going all right. Going all right. I'm trying. This is new for me.
You trying what, bro? Ain't nobody going to D.C.
So I'm definitely getting some ears and seeing where guys' minds are at. Guys were like, so what y'all do in D.C.? How's D.C.? Or I'm asking, what's your situation? What you thinking about? How you feeling? Any changes needed to be made?
How you feeling? Any changes need to be made, bro. You've never even been to an Eastern Conference Finals. You don't need to be worried about other people's changes. You need to be worried about what your changes need to be. That's what you need to be concerned about, because you have a point guard in John Wall who's about to be 30 years old, make $45 million a year, and has a torn Achilles. And on top of that, has a face like he's the black version of Tony Montana, like he just goes home at night and drops his whole head into a pile of cocaine. No disrespect, all right? Allegedly. Everything I'm saying about John Wall right now is alleged, okay? But Bradley Beal, he don't need to be recruiting no damn body. He need to be trying to get the hell up out of Dodge.
Made. Stephen A.
Yep.
Why hasn't Beal been able to recruit another superstar?
Because he's not a superstar.
Because the Wizards are not a great organization. Plain and simple. And I take no pleasure in saying that. I go back over 20 years with Ernie Grunfeld.
Look, this guy's going into the Wizards organization and Ernie Grunfeld. It's very simple shit. A superstar can only be recruited by another superstar. Kevin Durant was recruited by Steph Curry. It wasn't until Steph Curry came and gave his blessing and the okay that Kevin Durant uprooted. LeBron James was semi-recruited by Dwayne Wade at the 2008 Olympics. LeBron James was recruited again by Magic Johnson, who's still a superstar, even though he's been retired from the NBA for over 20 years. Superstars can only be recruited by other superstars. To get back to the point, Bradley Beal, very good player. I wouldn't call him a great player, very good player. He's not a superstar. He's a star. And he'd be your third option on a championship team. He's not able to recruit anybody.
Okay? But the Wizards are not an attractive organization right now. You don't see any of these stars talking about D.C. I love D.C. I love Chocolate City. I have people in D.C. I love very, very dearly. Their team stinks. They're a below average team. And the face of their franchise is perpetually hurt. And even when healthy, even though he's an all-star, refuses to develop a consistent jump shot.
Stephen A. Smith, is not that easy to develop a consistent jump shot. We don't know how hard John Wall is working. Some guys, that's just not their gift. Like Steph Curry, he could try to work on improving his bounce every day. And yes, there's going to be incremental improvement, but he's never going to have the bounce that John Wall had back in the day. Now, we saw Steph Curry throw that alley-oop to himself in the All-Star game. So he clearly works hard on trying to improve his explosiveness. But he's never going to be John Wall. He's never going to be Derrick Rose back in the day. He's never going to be Russell Westbrook. And it's the same thing with John Wall. He might take 800, 900, 1,000 jump shots a day. But that does not mean that he's ever going to be Steph Curry with the jump shot. It's just not going to happen.
It's John Wall. That's the reality. John Wall can play. John Wall's got heart. John Wall ain't scared. John Wall could go up against anybody. He's a rough rider. But you do find yourself from time to time wondering where the hell is that jump shot. You do find yourself in key moments like Game 7 in the conference semifinals against the Boston Celtics a couple of years ago, where it was Bradley Beal that showed up and dropped about 38 or 39.
Well, that happens sometimes, Stephen A. Smith. Sometimes you need help from your friends. Isaiah Thomas will get help from Joe Dumars sometimes.
And in the last 19 minutes of the game, it was an APB out for John Wall. Now, they point to heel injuries and foot injuries and knee injuries and all of this other stuff. But here's the thing. In the end, what it really comes down to is, are you the kind of player, and is this the kind of franchise that can attract marquee guys? The answer has been no.
And the answer is still no. And the question is, why can't Beal recruit another superstar? And you've gone on a 1-minute rant about John Wall, which seems to substantiate his view that you have a personal issue with him, Stephen A. Smith.
So what they've been stuck in is what I call basketball purgatory, Max. It's when you're not great and you ain't even a part of the championship equation, but then you don't stink enough to position yourself to get high draft picks. I
agree. That's the same sentiment that I put forth about the Charlotte Hornets with Kemba Walker, of course, led by Michael Jordan. They're in basketball purgatory right now.
Picks, etc., so you can get the quality of a Zion Williamson, somebody. You're right in the middle. Good enough to entertain, and people pay their money to walk through the turnstiles, hoping you'll win on a particular night. But when it really comes down to it, nobody expects a damn thing from you.
Well, look, I mean, Steve, when we look over the history of the NBA, over the course of a 15-year stretch, which is normally about how long a basketball generation lasts, around 15 years, there's really normally only going to be about 3 teams that win championships over a 15-year stretch. Every once in a while, you might have a 4th team that pops its head up in there, but normally it's only about 3 teams.
Because you're tinkering on average to be kind. And when you couple that with giving somebody $170 million and saying he's the face of the franchise, and he can play but can't necessarily recruit, and he's a star but he's not a superstar, Bradley Beal doesn't have a chance. You can't recruit in a situation like that. You know what Bradley Beal should do to help the Wizards? Ask to be traded.
I agree with that.
So they could use him to acquire the necessary assets.
And I believe that he will at the end of the season. I believe that Bradley Beal will ask to be traded.
Assets, so they could get other parts around John Wall, because him and John Wall together does not work in terms of championship.
It doesn't work at all.
They'll be good enough to get to the postseason, and a damn thing else they're going to do.
Let me make it really simple. There are 2 reasons that Bradley Beal can't recruit. 1, John Wall's contract makes it impossible for that team to ever be a serious title contender.
Agreed.
And 2, Bradley Beal isn't good enough.
Simple as that.
He's a really good player, but he is, at best, the 3rd best player on a championship contender.
Absolutely agree.
By the way, this is not an insult to Bradley Beal. He's a good 2-way player. I like him. Would want him on my team if I could have him. But, you know, Chris Bosh or Kevin Love or Robert Parrish or Horace Grant or Byron Scott, they're all good players. But none of those guys are the ones who would be recruiting superstars.
Absolutely. When you want to make a deal with another company, with another organization, you don't speak to the messenger boy. You speak to the board of trustees, right? You have to speak to a high-level official. You don't speak to there's no disrespect to Bradley Beal. Of course, what I said was a bit of hyperbole because he is a relatively high official on that team, and he would be on any team. For the most part, Bradley Beal's not going to be any worse than the 3rd best player on a championship-level team. And, you know, he deserves his respect. But Bradley Beal's not going to be able to recruit anybody because a recruiter has to be the best of his organization, and that's not him.
They're the ones who you add to 2 superstars as a 3rd wheel who's totally awesome, like an excellent 3rd best player to have, and now you can win a championship. It is what it is. There are levels, as Meek Mill said, there are levels to this, Stephen A. And Bradley Beal is on a certain level. I brought up Chris Middleton before. Chris Middleton would be a fine addition to the Lakers if he opts out. But what did I say? So long as you preserve the cap space to add AD the following year. Because if you had LeBron, AD, and Chris Middleton as your 3rd wheel, yeah, you mess around and win a championship.
Yes, I agree. And there are always going to be players like that in the NBA. That's why I stated earlier that Bradley Beal reminds me a lot of Mitch Richmond. Of course, Bradley Beal's game is much more face-up and perimeter-oriented than Mitch Richmond's was. But when it comes to his role in the NBA, Mitch Richmond was always a very highly respected 2-guard who never really bubbled too much because he couldn't get to the playoffs until he got to the Lakers, I think in 2001. I believe he won a championship as a reserve on that 0-1 Laker team. But Jordan highly, highly respected Mitch Richmond. And I think that Bradley Beal's one of those type of players. He's someone that people are not really sure of how good he is and how well he plays, and won't ever really know until he can get to a playoff contender.
If you had two great, if KD and Kawhi were on the same team, you add Bradley Beal, something like that, okay, now you're talking. But Bradley Beal is not at the level where he is the draw to a franchise.
Agreed.
Especially one that's cap-strung by a terrible John Wall contract.
Max, let me express to you where my opinion is different than yours. And I respect where you're coming from. I truly do. But here's the deal. I think more of Bradley Beal than you do.
Are you sure about that? You might think the exact same.
Bradley Beal is basically an undersized two guard. He's around 6'4", whatever. Then he's about 6'4". Max, he averages 25 a game.
Right, but he's averaging that on a bad team. And I give him credit. His numbers are relatively proficient, but he's still doing that on a bad squad. Do you think that Bradley Beal could be the second best player on a championship team? That's the question.
25 a game on 47% shooting, 35% from three-point range as the number one option. And he wasn't...
Right, the number one option on a team that's not going to make the playoffs.
Wasn't supposed to be the number one option. It was supposed to be John Wall. So when you say he's a number three, I'm not disagreeing with it.
So what you arguing about then?
I'm saying a number three on a championship squad, that means he's a tad shy of superstar status. But Bradley Beal is...
Nah. The number three option on a championship team is not a tad shy of superstar status. Your number one option is a superstar. But that goes back to the statement that Isaiah Thomas made to Stephen A. Smith, which I wholeheartedly agreed with, which is that the label of superstar is so cavalierly passed out to all these players. There are only 4 superstars in the NBA. But people like Stephen A. Smith will make you believe that there are 25 superstars in the league. There are not. Joel Embiid is not a superstar. Russell Westbrook, James Harden, Anthony Davis, Giannis Antetokounmpo, they are not superstars. Even Kyrie Irving, not a superstar. He's borderline because of how he's performed in the playoffs and in the championship round. But even he is not a superstar. There are only 4 superstars in the NBA. That's LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, Kawhi Leonard. Why do I say that? Because they've shown that they can dominate in the regular season, in the playoffs, and in the championship round. That's why. If you have not done that, you are not a superstar.
Beal is a star in this league.
Yeah, I agree.
So I got
it
that,
is so. What
he
I'm
doesn't
saying
have
is
help.
so.
It's not on him.
It's so gangster in the NBA. People never really realize how hard it is to win a championship. That's how hard it is. Bradley Beal's got to be your third best player.
Absolutely.
He's totally excellent, and he's got to be your third best player. If you think of the Warriors, the third best player in the Warriors is Klay Thompson.
I agree, and Bradley Beal is in that same area with Klay Thompson.
Are you ready for this? You're missing this, but you'll agree with me when I say this. It ain't that Bradley Beal is number 3. It's that John Wall can't be your number 1.
Well,
Stephen A. Smith don't even know what the fuck he's talking about. Once again, this is another example of a person arguing with their damn self. Either you believe that Bradley Beal is number 3 or you don't. The question should have been asked, Stephen A. Smith, do you think that Bradley Beal could be the second best player on a championship team? If you don't believe that, then stop arguing with yourself.
I think
he's got to be your number 2.
I think both things are true.
He can't be number 1.
Look.
Well, John Wall's not going to be number 2 because John Wall is a ball-centric point guard that's not going to make anybody better. So what would be the point of having John Wall on your team if you really aspire to win a championship anyway? His game is not really conducive to that.
Look, Bradley Beal's the number 1 scoring option, averaging 25 points a game, but what's the Wizards' record? If Bradley Beal's your leading scorer, that's your record.
John Wall can play. He's no scrub.
But anyway, that's basically it on that. I think that they came to a consensus without understanding so. So peace.